I was peeling apples for a pie when Grant walked in. The sound of the peeler against the skin filled the silence between us, steady and harmless, until he spoke. "From now on, Mom," he said, still looking at his phone, "the bank will transfer your retirement into my account." The words landed softly, like they weren't meant to hurt, but they split the air in half. I froze, apple in one hand, peeler in the other. He didn't even look up. "You don't need money," he added. "You need a place to die." The peeler slipped from my hand and hit the sink with a sharp metallic sound. I wanted to say something, to ask if I'd heard him right, but my throat felt locked. I turned back to the counter and pretended to keep working. My heart was beating so fast that it blurred into the ticking of the kitchen clock. Then Dana entered, her perfume arriving before her. "Is dinner ready?" she asked brightly, as if nothing in the world had cracked open seconds before. She leaned against the counter beside Grant, smiling like this was a normal evening. Grant didn't mention what he'd said, neither did I. I stirred the pot on the stove and nodded, my eyes fixed on the bubbling sauce that no longer smelled like food, but like something burning. Dana hummed while she set the table, her bracelets clicking together like coins. We ate in silence. They talked about real estate, their plans, their week ahead. No one asked about mine. When the plates were cleared, I washed the dishes, wiping each one carefully, my hands moving slower than usual. Grant disappeared into his office, Dana into the bedroom. I stayed behind in the dim kitchen. The refrigerator light blinked on when I opened the door. Cold air brushed my face. The casserole dish inside was the only thing that felt solid, real. I closed the door gently and stood there for a long time, the hum of the motor steady as breath. I realized then that the air in the house had changed, and something inside me had started to move with it. I lay in bed long after the house had gone quiet. The lamp cast a low light over the nightstand where a photo sat in a chipped wooden frame. Grant, age 7, all gums and missing teeth, grinning beside a mutt we'd pulled from the shelter. He had named it Socks, after the way its paws looked dipped in white paint. He cried when we brought it home, said it was the best day of his life. That same year, I gave up my second pair of work shoes so he could have a new backpack. I walked to the library job in winter, stuffing my boots with newspaper to keep the cold out. There were 3 jobs that year, 4 if you counted tutoring. I still remember the day the college acceptance letter came. He jumped on the couch and yelled, "We did it, Mom! We did it!" I sold my husband's tools to help cover his textbooks. I skipped doctor visits so he wouldn't skip classes. And now he calls me Carla. Not Mom, just Carla. We don't eat together. Dana says it's easier to keep separate schedules. I get a plate brought to my room sometimes. Other times nothing. I don't ask. That night, I got out of bed and opened the small lockbox at the back of the closet. My hands shook as I sorted through its contents. Old W-2s, handwritten budget sheets, the deed to the house, my name still there, and a folder marked Account History. I had kept everything. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I had always been the one to keep the numbers straight. I turned page after page, dates, deposits, and names. Then I saw it. A wire transfer form, notarized, my signature next to his. But I hadn't signed it. Not that one. I touched the ink lightly, tracing the loop of my forged name. Then I closed the folder and laid it on the bed beside me. It was time to prepare something else, something he wouldn't see coming. The next morning I heard the drill before I saw what they were doing. Dana stood by the back door while a locksmith replaced the deadbolt. She caught me watching from the hallway and smiled that polite, careful smile she saves for store clerks and strangers. "Just for safety," she said. "You forget to close it sometimes." I didn't argue. I only nodded and folded my arms tighter across my chest. Grant walked in a few minutes later, jingling the new keys. He looked proud, like he'd done me a favor. "Don't go out alone, okay? We don't want you getting lost or hurting yourself." He patted my shoulder as he spoke, his voice soft in a way that felt rehearsed. I looked up at him and smiled. "Of course, dear." That evening, after they went upstairs, I sat in the quiet kitchen and listened to the hum of the refrigerator. The house no longer felt like mine, but it still breathed with my habits, the cup hooks I'd installed, the uneven tile I'd refused to replace, the rhythm of every creak in the floor. I took my cardigan, slipped out the side door, and walked toward the shed. The grass brushed my ankles, and the cool air felt like a secret. The padlock on the shed was rusted, but I'd kept a spare key hidden inside a cracked flower pot years ago. It still worked. Inside, the air smelled of dust and paint. I knelt near the back wall, pried up the loose board, and pulled out a small metal tin I hadn't touched in decades. Inside were things I'd forgotten. Old coins, birth certificates, a faded photo of Grant as a boy, and a sealed bottle of concentrated bleach from my cleaning job at the elementary school. I held it up to the light. The liquid inside looked almost silver. Then I set it down carefully. I wasn't planning to hurt anyone. I only needed a reminder that I wasn't helpless. I closed the tin, covered it again, and left the shed with my heartbeat steady. Upstairs, I heard their laughter through the open window, light and careless. I turned off the kitchen light and started planning what came next. I pretended to nap on the couch when I heard Dana's heels cross the floor. The air smelled faintly of her perfume and printer ink. She set a stack of papers on the dining table and whispered something to Grant before leaving the room. Their voices carried just enough for me to hear what I wasn't supposed to. "She won't notice," Dana said. "She can barely remember what day it is." Grant chuckled. "By next week, everything will be in my name." The door clicked shut behind them. I waited a few minutes, then opened my eyes. The clock ticked steadily. I moved to the table and studied the papers. They weren't bank brochures, as they'd said. They were transfer forms, all filled out. My name was on each one, the signature neatly forged. Almost perfect, almost. I took out my old reading glasses and began to copy every number, every line. I wrote slowly, carefully, the way I used to balance ledgers back when precision meant keeping my job. Then I slid everything back exactly as I'd found it. That evening, while they sat in the living room watching television, I stood at the counter whisking eggs and milk for Grant's favorite dessert, flan. He had always loved it since childhood, the one sweet I never refused to make. The irony made me smile. Once the custard cooled, I lifted the stack of copied forms, sealed them inside a plastic bag, and pressed it beneath the flan in a deep glass dish. I poured water around it, filling the space, and slid the dish into the freezer. It would harden overnight, the truth trapped beneath a layer of sweetness. Before bed, I wrote a note on a scrap of foil and placed it on top of the dish. Mothers keep records too. When I closed the freezer door, I felt something I hadn't in years, a quiet satisfaction. The house hummed as it always did, but now the sound felt different, like the low pulse of a plan taking shape. Upstairs, I heard the murmur of their voices fading into laughter, unaware that their next morning would begin with a scream. The house was still when I rose. I moved through the kitchen without sound, the way I used to when Grant was a baby, trying not to wake him before the sun. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat at the small table by the window, and listened to the creak of footsteps above me. The morning light spilled across the countertop. I could hear Dana's voice in the hallway, sharp, tired, already irritated. Grant's slower steps followed. Then the fridge door opened. Silence. A few seconds passed, maybe less. Then a shatter. Glass on tile. The heavy sound of something dropped without thought. I didn't flinch. Grant's scream came next, not pain, shock, pure disbelief. I heard Dana rush down the stairs barefoot. "What? What is it?" I didn't turn. I knew the scene. She gasped. "What the hell is that?" Still no answer. He couldn't speak. The dish had broken on the floor, jagged edges glinting beneath a half-melted block of ice. Inside it, perfectly legible bank forms, one with my signature, one with his forgery. I took a slow sip from my mug. Then I looked up at them. Grant frozen mid-motion, Dana's hand over her mouth. "Good morning, dear," I said. "Want some toast?" And ate it. His eyes snapped to me. His hands trembled. Dana crouched down and tried to touch the papers, then pulled her fingers back from the cold. "What did you do?" she asked me, voice unsteady. I stood up, walked to the cupboard, and pulled out a fresh plate. "You know, I used to keep all your report cards in the same box," I said to Grant. "I guess some habits stick." He didn't answer. The fridge door stood wide open behind him, humming into the quiet. The ice continued to melt slowly around the proof. I set 2 slices of bread in the toaster, my back to them now. Grant hadn't moved. Dana stood like someone waiting for a verdict, and I felt no fear, only clarity because they'd seen what I was capable of. And that was only the beginning. Dana called it a family meeting. She wore a cardigan and spoke in the same voice she used when hosting book club, smooth and low, like she was about to offer tea. "We know things got intense yesterday." she began, glancing at Grant, who hadn't looked at me since the flan incident. "But it's only because we care about you, Carla." I nodded slowly. "We're just trying to protect you," she said. "You don't need stress in your golden years." I folded my hands neatly in my lap. "That's kind of you." No raised voice. No accusation. Just the same tone I used the first time Dana burned a casserole and insisted it was intentional caramelization. Later that afternoon, I walked into the bank alone. The security guard offered to open the door. I thanked him. Inside, I asked to speak to the manager. Not a teller, not a rep, the manager. She blinked when she saw me, then smiled quickly. "Mrs. Whitlock, I believe you knew my husband, and your father coached my son's Little League team." Recognition bloomed, and respect. An hour later, the accounts were mine again. Sole control, all of it. Grant's name gone. I signed the forms with a steady hand. By 4:00, I was at this courthouse. My documents were already notarized. I'd prepared them years ago when Samuel passed, though I never imagined I'd use them this way. But foresight is a habit formed in the margins when you live paycheck to paycheck, when you raise a child alone. The clerk stamped everything with a sharp, final sound. The house was now locked inside a trust. No sale without my death, no inheritance without conditions, and certainly no loopholes for either of them. I returned home before sunset. They were on the patio, whispering over their phones. I walked past without a word, set the kettle to boil, and pulled out my ledger. Not the financial one. This one was older, handwritten. A list of debts, not owed to me. Owed by me, because it was time I settled those, too. I was passing the hallway when I heard Dana's voice. "She's not going to last," she whispered, sharp and clipped. "If we can't sell that house soon, we'll lose our window." A pause, then Grant's voice, lower but clearer. "She'll sign, she's soft." I stopped. Not because I was shocked. That part was long past. I stopped because I knew the exact moment he stopped being my son and became someone else's investment plan. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the blades slice the air above me. Soft. They thought I was soft. They didn't see the sharpness growing under my silence. By morning, I had a list. 3 copies of the title document, notarized and clean. One I sealed in an envelope and mailed to my lawyer's office across town. Another I took downtown and placed in the safety deposit box I had quietly reopened last week under my maiden name. The last one I kept at home. I slipped it behind the wedding album, the one with Samuel's handwriting on the first page. The only place in this house I knew neither of them would dare look. I closed the cover gently, ran my hand along the leather spine, and placed it back on the shelf. Later that evening, Dana asked if I'd seen the utility bill. I told her it was probably in the kitchen drawer. She smiled and thanked me. Grant didn't say much at dinner, but I saw how his eyes followed me when I stood up, how they flicked toward the hallway when I walked past. He was starting to wonder if I'd overheard, and I was starting to wonder what else they'd say once they thought I couldn't hear at all. Dana knocked lightly and entered without waiting. She carried a tray with a bowl of soup and a spoon too large for the cup. "Chicken and rice," she said, setting it down. "Good for focus." I smiled. "We're just a little worried about your memory, Carla. That whole thing with the fridge, well, maybe you should rest more. Just take it easy." I nodded. "I'll try." I let my eyes drift as if I'd forgotten where I was. She left, closing the door behind her with exaggerated gentleness. Later, Grant came in holding a folder. "Hey, Mom," he said too brightly. "Just some routine paperwork the lawyer forgot to file. We'll take care of everything." He laid the papers in front of me, real signatures already printed beside the lines, my own name half-traced in gray, waiting for me to complete it. I looked at the lines, blank to anyone else, blinking neon to me. He handed me a pen. I signed carefully, with a flourish, the way I used to sign report cards when I still believed he was proud to bring them home. He grinned. "Thanks, Mom, you're the best." Dana appeared in the hallway, watching like a stage director from the wings. When they left, laughing softly down the stairs, I sat up straighter. I pulled the drawer beside me and removed my copy. The trust document, revised and notarized, with the property fully protected and irrevocable. The signatures on the page were clean, legal, final. I tucked it into the canvas bag I'd packed the night before. IDs, insurance papers, receipts, everything in order. Tomorrow, I had a notary appointment at 9 o'clock. And the documents Grant had handed me? They'd be meaningless by noon. But he didn't need to know that yet. The hallway was quiet, except for Grant's voice leaking under the door. "I don't understand," he snapped. "What do you mean it's not valid?" A pause, then louder. "What do you mean it's in her name?" Another pause, a sound like something crashing onto his desk. I leaned back from the wall and stepped silently to the stairs. By the time I reached the bottom, he was storming into the kitchen, Dana close behind him. His face had gone the color of ash. "They said the account access is restricted. The paperwork we gave them isn't binding." Dana pulled out her phone, scrolling furiously. "The sale isn't going through. It's frozen." Grant turned to her. "How the hell did she—" I stepped into the room. "Tea, anyone?" They froze. I reached into the cupboard, pulled out my favorite mug, chipped on one side but still solid, and filled it from the kettle. The fridge hummed quietly behind me, a steady companion. Dana tried to smile. "Did you do something?" I looked up, stirring gently. "No more than you would have done, dear." She didn't reply. Grant stared at the floor. I sat at the table, folded my hands around the warm ceramic, and took a long sip. They stayed standing like statues, unsure if they should scream or whisper. Later that night, their bedroom light stayed on. I heard the low murmur of argument, Dana's voice cutting through with sharp edges, Grant's with clipped panic. I closed my door, pulled up the covers, and lay back into the pillows. The silence felt different now, less like exile, more like insulation. Outside, the wind brushed the window pane in soft gusts. Inside, I slept through the night without waking once. Weeks passed. The front door shut behind them for the last time on a Thursday. Grant didn't say a word. Dana muttered something about mistakes on both sides, but her voice was too brittle to carry meaning. The formal notice had been delivered 2 days prior, neatly folded and signed by a judge. They had 30 days. They left in 10. I stayed behind. The guest room emptied quickly. I donated the furniture to the shelter down the road, the one with the women who always thank you twice. They sent a kind card the next day. I repainted the kitchen in the pale color I'd always wanted. No one commented on it but me. That was enough. The fridge runs quieter now. It doesn't clunk or rattle like it used to when someone slammed it shut. Inside, there's leftover vegetable soup in glass containers, a round loaf of fresh bread I bought at the farmer's market, a lemon tart that my neighbor Alice left on the porch with a note. To new beginnings. There are no hidden folders, no sealed bags, no frozen copies. I pull out my notebook, the one I used to keep grocery lists in, back when I still asked what they liked for dinner. I write on a clean page. He tried to use my name like an ATM. I gave him a ledger. I close the book. The house creaks when the wind shifts, but the silence inside is mine now. No one turns the volume up on the TV. No one changes the thermostat without asking. Just the soft murmur of the fridge. I make tea, sit by the window, let the afternoon light fall across my knees. Outside, the neighbor's cat jumps from one fence post to another. Inside, I breathe, and I think about what I might bake next.